Welcome, everyone. We are back for another episode. And this week, I am happy to have on Cheryl Petersen Pine. And Cheryl and I have actually known each other for a number of years at this point, I guess it is. And she is a graduate of the Peter Drucker and Masatoshi Ito Graduate School of Business at Claremont Graduate University. And for those of you who have been around for a minute, you know that I used to work there. So that's how I met Cheryl, and she got her executive MBA there. And she is currently the Chief Financial Officer for East Valley Community Health Center, which is a federally qualified health center with several clinics in Southern California. One of the reasons that I brought Cheryl on today is because I want to talk about the other side of healthcare. I think when people think about the healthcare industry, they primarily think about nurses and doctors and the people that you see on the front lines when you go in for an appointment or the ER, something like that. But being part of a clinic or a hospital, there's a whole business side to it as well. And so we're going to get into a little bit of that with Cheryl, where she talks about what that's like and what that looks like. But at the end of the day, healthcare is still a business, hospitals are still a business, and she is the CFO of one. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that means. And that's not her first experience. She has been a senior financial executive for the Los Angeles Conservation Corps and a number of other different nonprofits. The Loma Linda Veterans Association for Research and Education. I mean, she just has an extensive history. One of the other things I want to point out, and this is something that we actually have in common, she has a BFA from the Academy of Arts. So she has a bachelor's degree in art and then went on to get her EMBA from Drucker. And now she's in finance. So that's always quite the interesting transition for me. But Cheryl, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom. I'm so happy to have you here today.
I'm happy to be here, Julia. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay, I want to dive in because I know we have a lot to talk about because you have such a wealth of knowledge and experience, and I want to make sure that we can squeeze everything out of you during this
Absolutely.
interview. So tell me a little bit about your main responsibilities in your current position right now.
So I am, as you said, the Chief Financial Officer of East Valley Community Health Center. It is a federally qualified health center, which is a designation from the federal government. And we basically, our biggest patient base are the working poor. We are providing health services for those that would not be able to get it elsewhere. And it's very important to us because we feel that everyone is entitled to high quality healthcare. And so that is our focus. We work with East San Gabriel Valley and into the Pomona Valley. We have 8 clinics and have remained open during this pandemic. My role is to manage both the finance functions and the billing functions. And for every time that a patient sees a provider, we have to file a claim. So that's where that's where 85% of our cash comes in from, is for patient revenue. So that is, I have a team of billers and coders, and then obviously the more general finance functions like, you know, payroll, accounts payable, things like that. But we're about $30 million annual budget. So it's a lot of processing.
Right. Wow. And then for those who don't know, who aren't in the Southern California area, that's where she is.
Oh, I'm
those
sorry.
are the areas. No, it's okay. I didn't mention it either. You're in Southern California, so San Gabriel Valley and
Pomona Valley.
And Pomona Valley, that's really like in the center of Southern California. So for those who are listening from other states or in other parts of the world, that is the area that you're in.
Yes, we are in LA County. So all the news that we're seeing about LA County and the pandemic, we are serving those patients, doing COVID testing, We actually were one of the first clinics in LA County to roll out vaccinations. So COVID-19 vaccinations. So yeah, we've been very, very busy.
Wow.
Very busy.
Wow. Yes. I saw that you shared getting your vaccination on LinkedIn. So that was really exciting. And I think it's great for people to see that, people are taking it. I know for me, that made me a lot more comfortable to see that you were taking it. So,
Oh, absolutely. I didn't even hesitate. As a matter of fact, yeah, I was definitely an early adopter.
good, good. That's amazing. Well, thank you for sharing a little bit more about what you do, because I think sometimes CFO can be an elusive term. Like, what does that actually look like? And what you do on the healthcare side is even a little bit different. Mostly the claims and all of that. Like, because I know there's a lot of different facets to being a CFO depending on
There
what
are.
type of industry that you're in.
Well, and there's also business development and finding new locations, finding new areas, lines of business. And I collaborate pretty closely with the entire C-suite, the operation side
Mm.
versus the um, finance side, to ensure that we keep it moving forward.
That's good. That's good. Do you
Mhm.
do grants and things like that fall under what you do, or is that more on the development side?
It's more on the development side.
Okay.
However, my team submits all the reporting
Mm.
from a finance perspective. So there's from the traditional nonprofit sense, we don't have the magnitude. Like I've worked at nonprofits where 80% of their revenue is actually coming from grants.
Right.
So we don't have quite that percentage, but we do have what we actually refer to as contracts and grants from
Mm.
different LA County um, offices to serve the HIV population or the
Mm.
STD programs,
Okay.
things like that.
Okay. Wow, that's such a great service. And I'm so glad. I actually didn't realize what your I never knew what your clinic
Well,
did.
and
So this is
it's
really helpful.
a lot of people don't realize. So our health center actually has clinical programs, your typical medical programs. We also have behavioral health programs. We have vision. We have dental. And then we have very special chronic care management programs. We have HIV programs. There's it's a patient-centered focus on all of their healthcare, right?
Mm.
So there is a lot of services that we offer. We also have programs for the homeless. So we work with our communities um, intimately.
That's so great. Okay, I'm going to make sure that I link all the information for your clinics below so that people can go and check that out and see what's
Absolutely.
available, because I know I do have a big base of listeners in Southern California, in the LA area. So I
Mhm.
think this is a really great resource for them to know about and be able to find, and even for people to be able to find something similar in their own community as well. So thank you. That's
Sure.
amazing. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about your journey to this place, because I think some people, they see CFO and it's this big ominous position, the C-suite and all that. I love that you're laughing about it. But it is, I think it is. I think for some people, they think it's not attainable. They don't really understand the path to get there. And I know we all have unique paths into whatever career we get into. But can you share with us just a couple of poignant transitions that you had in your career that got you to this place?
So you mentioned I have an art degree. So I came out of art school though, and I realized that artists, it's very hard to support yourself to be an artist, right? By being an artist. So I had just had a son, and I had moved. I think my son at that time was 4, and we'd moved back to Southern California. So I kind of focused on being a mom for a while, and then we got back to Southern California, and I saw a job listing for a bookkeeper, which I had done before. Bookkeeping is like the most basic finance that there is. and at a museum called the Southwest Museum. It's actually the oldest museum in Southern California. It has since been absorbed by a larger institution, but and I remember walking in for that interview and walking down this grand staircase and thinking, this is what I want to do. I want to work for a museum. And that was not that distant from an art degree, right? So
Right.
I went in, and at the time, it was the mid 90s. And for nonprofits that were struggling, there was not as much of a requirement for 3 letters behind your name to become a role within an organization. So I was hired as this bookkeeper role. And about 3 months in, I went to the executive director and I said, I think this role is not really just a bookkeeper. So long story short, I became the controller, right,
Oh,
of
wow.
this museum. And it was a small budget. I want to say 5 or 6 million. So relatively speaking, it was a much smaller budget. And I worked there for 7 years, bringing them up. They had what often happens is people kind of push finance aside, like, oh yeah, we'll look at the numbers later. Um, so so that started my career. And once I became the controller, uh, one of the board members worked with a accounting firm in Beverly Hills. And so for 2 days, one of the partners came out and trained me on nonprofit accounting or fund accounting.
Mm.
And that was where it started. Like everything started to make sense. And
Okay, hold on, hold on. I want to go back to something that I hope people don't miss in that story. So, you are a newer professional. You're doing this job that you have done before, you feel comfortable with it, and you went to your boss and said, I think this is more than just a bookkeeper. Let's reclassify, let's figure this out.
yep,
That's huge. And I want to make sure that people who are listening understand that you took a leap and you knew what you were doing. You were
mhm,
aware of the differences between the two and you advocated for yourself
yep,
to get a better position. That
yep.
is huge. That's huge.
It
That's
was. And keep in mind, in those days, I mean, this was, virtually 30 years ago. There that didn't necessarily mean a lot more money, but
right.
but
Especially in
then
nonprofit world.
exactly. But so I was there for a while, and I went to another organization, and there was a point where when you work for a museum, it's very mission driven.
Mhm.
And after that, I went to another organization and it was not as mission driven. And so I was into my career, 10 or 12 years. And I realized that the role wasn't serving where I wanted to be,
Mm.
right? I had committed my career to nonprofits. I've been working for nonprofits since my 20s, and that is a while ago. um, and I decided that I needed to make, again, a leap. And so I left that position without another one waiting. I really felt strongly that I wanted to move back towards LA County. And sorry, my earbuds coming out.
That's all right.
um, move back towards LA County and be more mission driven. And so I took a pay cut at the time to get back into what I really felt strongly about. And that kind of set the trajectory for going to work. I was at the Armory Center for the Arts, and then I went to the Los Angeles Conservation Corps, and which then led me to this particular role. Um,
Okay, okay, hold on. We pause again. So now we're in a different transition where you have recognized that your core values of what
yes,
you wanted for yourself, for your career, are not aligning with the organization that you're at.
yes,
So this is something I've heard for years from different clients, former students, all of that. They are not bought into whatever organization that they're at. And it doesn't have to be nonprofit. I mean, yours
right,
was. it doesn't have to be nonprofit. If you don't believe in what your company is doing, you likely, like, there's going to be a values clash there at some point. But following that, being able to say, this is not what I want, and taking that leap, that's risky. But if you can get through whatever that transition is going to look like, it's worth it, I think, in the end.
Yes, it actually really is. And that was, I don't know, almost 20 years ago. So that I did that. And so my financial needs were different at that
Right.
time than they are
Right.
now. And I would also, it doesn't have to be that you clash with what the organization is doing. Sometimes you can have a difference of opinion on how it's being managed, any of
Right.
those types of things. So, and at the time, I didn't feel I was doing something remarkable. I just knew I was not at my best when I was there, right?
Mm,
And it makes me think about something that I've been thinking a lot about since my master's program, which is how we interact with our employees every day affects how they go home and partner and parent, right?
yes.
So if you spend your entire day feeling that you're undervalued or overworked or unappreciated, um, and the overworked piece, you can be overworked, but if the people are saying the right things and fortifying you in the right way, then the work isn't the same as the work.
Yes.
I was getting some feedback from one of my employees in prep for this talk, because I wanted to kind of, let's see how I have really done here. And the employee had said, "You let us do our work," right? And
Mm.
so then I said, "But how does that make you feel?" He said, "It makes me feel trusted, and that that I'm going to be doing my best for the organization." And I don't know that I set out with that specific, that today I'm going to make sure so and so feels trusted. Um,
Right.
but it happens, right? And I think um, there there's so much focus on looking at where people have weaknesses, right?
Mm.
And if all you
Yes.
ever do is focus on weaknesses, the best you're ever going to get is mediocrity. Whereas if you focus on their strengths and what they do well, then they're able to thrive in the organization. And it's not that the things that they're weak in aren't important and you can work on them, but you can maybe reassess or realign. So have become very focused, I think, because of my own experiences that were not always optimal in organizations, of making sure that when my team leaves at the end of the day, they can go home and be a good partner and a good parent, right? Um, because I did go home many times early in my career, and I know I was not the best parent because I had a horrible day, and not a horrible day because there was so much work to do, a horrible day because of just interactions that happened. And I think that's really important, to find a place that you, as a human, are able to find some sort of um, contentment, joy, right, on
Yes.
some level at work, right?
Yes.
Every day isn't perfect. I'm not going to Pollyanna that,
Right.
but I do think that you need to be able to find some positive pieces in your work. And I
Yes.
think that's really important.
Yes. Cheryl, I resonate with that so much, so much. You and I have such a similar background. I've had similar situations,
Hmm.
with managers who didn't understand who I was, what I brought to the table, were threatened by it, didn't know how to support it, all the things, all the things. What I didn't know at the time, and I hope that this might help somebody else who could be in a similar situation. What I didn't realize at the time was that I actually had really bad anxiety.
Hmm.
And looking back on that time, I was actually in a depressive episode for probably 2 to 3 years.
Hmm.
But I didn't know. because I had never experienced that in that way. And I had no idea. Looking back, I'm like, oh yeah, obviously you were depressed. Look at all of your behaviors. Look at what you were doing. Like, that's not good behavior. But I didn't know because I had never been faced with that. Nobody in my life at that time, I didn't know what it looked like.
Mhm.
And even my husband, he just thought I was tired and
Right.
stressed out and burnt out and was just like, oh, you're resting, you're just chilling out. No, I was in a complete depressive space because I was giving everything into the organization and I wasn't getting anything positive back. So here you are, somebody with anxiety. I'm also a perfectionist. I'm in a depressive episode. I'm trying to do all the right things. I don't know.
Yep.
And it's a recipe for disaster. But
It
then I
is.
I left into a new, healthier organization, healthier management. It took me about 3 or 4 months to snap out of it. But once I did, I realized, oh, that wasn't good. That wasn't a good that wasn't a good situation. So I
Mhm.
appreciate hearing that because I think this is good for people who might be in the middle of that right now because with COVID, people working from home or being forced to go into the office if they have to, all of that, I think there are a lot of underlying issues that people could be dealing with, but they don't know what it looks like and they don't know what it sounds like. And I think this is really helpful to give them some signs to look out for.
Mhm. Yeah, and you and I have discussed this before, but we all bring our baggage to work, right? Um, and I know for me that there was a specific period in my previous employment, previous employer, and I know it carried over to this one, where I was very reactive, right? I had a very hard time realizing what I was actually able to control and what was my responsibility. And I had things I needed to get done. And when I was doing them, um, the pressure and the stress of them would, you carry it with you.
Right.
And I became, as one of my professors, would point out, there's a difference between reacting and responding. And I didn't really understand that taking, a beat and understanding, wait a minute, how is this feeling, or what does this mean? And I would also point out, because I've experienced this as well, that we all have a role in what's going on in our lives, right? So there are plenty, I would argue, plenty of work experiences where I could have been better, right?
Yeah.
Had I been more self-aware, more any of these things. I actually stayed at an organization that for the 5 years I was there never had a performance evaluation. And so never got feedback on an annual basis,
Wow.
not even on an annual basis, which isn't even optimal, as we know.
Right. Right.
But and never said anything, right? I just kept my head down and was doing work. And I would argue some people confuse keeping your head down and just getting to the finish line as being resilient. It is not the same thing because, like you mentioned, you keep your head down, you're getting the work done that you need to do, and you just sink into what Jeremy Hunter, one of our professors at Claremont, would refer to as hypoarousal, where you have your range of resilience and you have where you're manic and then where you have just dropped.
Mhm.
And back to my point of thinking where you need to find your role in things, I think we all, as we're looking at our careers, need to find ways to become more self-aware.
Mhm.
So, and I know people are using that word self-awareness. What does that mean exactly? But you have to be able to own what your role was in the situation. So part of where I'm going with this is I sometimes think that you can take a working environment and transform it based on the work you're doing on yourself, right? So after I had been at East Valley for a couple of years, I decided to go back for my master's at Drucker, and I had known since 2010 that one way or another I was going to go to Drucker, because I had heard Rick Wartzman of the Drucker Institute speak at a leadership event I was at, and he brought Frances Hesselbein from the Girl Scouts of America, and I thought, that is where I need to go. And I was very lucky that I worked somewhere where, I told my CEO, I said, I really, really want to do this, but I'm doing it in 2 years, but I'm going to throw myself into it for 2 years, right? A lot of people, as you know, do those programs part-time.
Right.
So while I was there, I was on the graduate student council. I was participating in mentor programs and students' first day programs, and went to Singapore and Hong Kong and went on a trip to Silicon Valley. And I threw myself into that program. And I would argue that the person I came out of that program was a far more balanced, healthy, and I don't mean healthy that I wasn't healthy before, but I think we're able to look at ourselves differently after you immerse yourself in that type of program. Because I didn't go to a business program to learn how to do business. I'd been doing it for years, right? I know how to do business. What I wanted to do was learn more about how to work with people, myself included, right? And I remember in my career statement mentioning I wanted to learn more about how leaders behave. Like, what is that special thing that they know how to respond in this situation, and not say this in this other situation, what all of those were. But I wanted to figure out how to work with people.
Yes.
And I think it's one thing to know all the skills that you need, the task skills that you need. It's the rest of it, right? And being able to do those things that there's not necessarily a checklist or a desktop procedure on how to respond appropriately in a meeting.
Right.
But learning and even graduating in 18, I have continued to do research upon research upon research on this idea of reinforcing your front line, and really working with individual contributors, not as a trajectory to make them a manager, but just to make them more happy, fulfilled human beings in the office. Yes. You like that one, do you, Julie?
Yes, because so this has been a topic in other interviews that I've done about, I interviewed Megan Metcalf, and she is the sales director, sales trainer, sales manager. So she does training for sales professionals at Toshiba. Okay. And we talked about that, this idea of somebody's a really good salesperson and they become a manager, but they're not a good manager because they're not a good people management person. So right. I love hearing that. And I love hearing people that are recognizing the difference between the two, because I've been in so many organizations where that hasn't been the case. So my experience has been very narrow in, you see people getting promoted because they've been there the longest, because they're really good at their current job, not because they're actually fit to manage other people. And then you see this mass exodus of people because they can't handle the management style of whoever has come up. But I also have to go back to the self-awareness piece and the owning your own part. I so appreciate that you said that, and I'm going to make a shameless plug for my own coaching program right now, because I think one of the things that sets my program apart is that is one of the first modules that you do. It's called Rating Your Realistic Reality. And I ask you really hard-hitting questions about what are you doing? What is your reality? What is your realistic relationship with your manager? Not the made-up one in your head, but give me the examples. If you have a negative relationship with your manager, give me the examples of why. If something is going on, if you have turmoil in your position, why? What does that look like? Is it based in reality? is it based on something that actually happened to you or something that you have taken and blown up in your head because you're a perfectionist, because you're taking some other past trauma and you're applying it into this position? So I really want people to dig into what is my truth, what is my current reality, because if we can get a baseline for that, you then can start to own, okay, I could have said something different here. I could have advocated for myself here, or I didn't handle this the best, or you're right. There is no justification for this. And now I need to release it and let it go. And that's where we start so that we can then build up moving forward. So,
Yeah.
I love that you shared that. Thank you so much.
And I wanted to piggyback on something you said about the manager piece. So, or promoting people to be managers and not necessarily the best option for them. I also would argue that we spend globally, we being a people, globally spend a lot of money on executive coaching, getting people ready for their next role, and how to keep leaders from being a liability to their organizations. Right? That's a big business. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we do not spend the same amount of time and energy and money in reinforcing. I use the term reinforcing your front line, but really working with your individual contributors and your subject matter experts and giving them tools that seem so simple, right? Focus more on the positive. Let's do exercises in gratitude, or different things that actually do build up their resilience, right? That increases their resilience. It increases the well in which they can draw on in times of more demand, et cetera. But we as a world, as a globe, mm-hmm. don't invest that kind of time and energy. And I think we're seeing it a lot during COVID-19, where people, they're burned out, mm-hmm. right? And it's not just Absolutely. In healthcare, it's everywhere. Yep. And now everybody's using this word resilience, but being resilient, as I said earlier, isn't just about making it to the finish line, right? Because you can if you look at it from a marathon perspective, right? You can train properly, put the right, fuel in your body, get the rest you need, take all the time to train and get to the end of a marathon and have enough resilience in your body, right, that you are able to recover quicker from that marathon. Mm-hmm. Or you get the guy that's like, I'm just going to throw on some shoes and I'm going to run the LA Marathon because I can. And for a week afterwards, their body is just demolished, right? It's the same idea with our brains and our focus and simple things that we can do. But unfortunately, and one of my favorite sayings is common sense does not mean common action. And it's been attributed to a lot of people, but Stephen Covey started that. And, a lot of people say, well, that's just so simple, focusing on the positive or making sure you say thank you to your employees. Just because it's simple and sounds so common sense doesn't mean that people are doing it. Right. So I think that is something, and that's actually been what I've been passionate about over the last couple of years. And, when I was in my master's program, as I told you, I wanted to be able to work better with people. When I was in my master's program, I would use my team as like a petri dish, as my husband calls it, right? Come in and say, okay, today we're going to try this exercise.
Yes.
And, it worked. It worked in a lot of the exercises we did, and they were more open to it because not everyone's open to things either, right? And it can take some time. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting too, because it gives the opportunity to find commonalities with the people that work for you. I stole one of my professor's exercises, which was basically looking at somebody through a new lens, right? So pretend you've never seen that person before. And one of my team had selected her father for that exercise. And, she was brought to tears during the team meeting. Like, I looked at my dad like I'd never seen him, and then I saw this and this and this in him. And she and I had both had a similar father experience. So we were able to build some trust on that common, experience. So I think I can't say enough about taking the time, and it doesn't have to be a lot of time, to really work with your people and make them better humans, right?
Yes.
Happier humans.
Right. And I think, okay, I'm a little biased because I'm a coach. So, but my target audience for coaching are aspiring managers and just general managers, people who are managing, because I don't think they get enough feedback. I don't think they get enough support, because we hear the term executive coach and you think, oh, you have to be in the C-suite, you have to be a director, you have to be at this really high level. No, you can do coaching at any point in your career journey, and it can look, it'll look different depending on where you're at. But imagine, if you're a manager that's like, I know somebody else needs to help this person because maybe it's not the best fit to be in that mentor role, then get them a coach. It's not like it has to be forever. Get them, 5 sessions with somebody from the outside so that that person feels comfortable. They can have some growth. You can set some goals. I mean, that will transform. I can tell you, as somebody who probably needed some external coaching at the time, had that happened for me, I likely would have shown up and had completely different realizations about myself in the moment that I now look back on and go, oh yeah, that wasn't great. That was not your finest moment. But nobody had invested in me at that point, and here's the other thing I want to say, because I know you're a high achiever, I'm a high achiever. Like, we just shoot for the moon with everything. A lot of times people think that high achievers do not need coaching and do not need management and oversight. We do need that. We're not necessarily going to show you our weaknesses in areas that we need help in, because likely we are dealing with perfectionism also. But if you build enough rapport with us, we'll tell you, we'll be comfortable, and we'll let you know, hey, I'd really like to grow in this area. Or we'll ask you, where can I grow? Can we work on that? Can I have a coach? I mean, that's such a simple thing. But I think for people who are high achievers, they get passed over for it because they're already excelling, and managers don't think, oh, that person might need some additional help.
Okay, so my master's program, I took these 2 courses, the Executive Mind, right? Executive Mind 1 and 2. It was a semester of building your attention, responding appropriately, and a million other important things, mindfulness at work. And it's funny because it was very novel to me at the time. I had done a lot of work just through life experiences myself. And so it was the natural trajectory. But I also know there were plenty of people in that class that were like, I'm just gonna, type this journal entry and I'm just gonna move on. Not everybody gets the same benefit from an experience, whether it be coaching, whether it be education. It's what you put into it.
Right. Absolutely.
And I think that so you can't just say, okay, I want this person to get coaching, or okay, I want this person, because there were plenty of people when we would even do programs, or I would do exercises for my classes in our team meetings that were like, whatever. But I can also see in some that it had a very positive effect on them, right? I also know that it has fundamentally transformed who I am, what I learned, and because the more I'm able to share it and the more I'm able to discuss it, I've presented on topics like this several times, that it's part of who I am now, right?
Right.
And I was reading recently, everybody talks about employee engagement, but what feeds employee engagement is the employee experience, right? If the employee experience, and that doesn't mean manager experience, that doesn't mean leader experience. If the employee experience is solid, what that is, if it's fortifying to them, then that elevates their engagement. Everybody skips right over to the employee engagement, and they don't really look at what is their experience when they come in, right?
Yeah.
So I think if we go back to that piece on what their experience is, how they feel valued, appreciated, those types of things, then you're able to really see the difference in engagement.
Yes, absolutely. Cheryl, this is like a master class in in managing people. I love it. I love this conversation so much. Okay. In the interest of time, I'm gonna skip to a couple things. Because I know we've shared quite a bit of tips and tricks and all that. Do you have any other management tips that you want to share? Because I know you've had such a healthy management experience, also having gone through the EMBA program. Is there anything else you want to share that you feel like people really need to know?
Okay, so a couple of things. One is that I think there are ways to find joy in the work that you do every day, right? And that's on you. You can't wait for your boss to come and say, "Oh, do you not have enough happiness at work? What can I do to do that?" Right?
Yes.
So and it doesn't even have to be in work, right? So for me, I'm really passionate about sharing the information like we've talked. So I post every day on LinkedIn, things that I've written original. I share things I'm reading, things such as that. But I think it's really important for people to take the responsibility of making their job fulfilling to them. And if it's not, then you have to have, other conversations with yourself. From a manager perspective, I really can't say enough about leading with gratitude, right? So do not take for granted that your people know that you appreciate them. Yes. And I think, depending on background, et cetera, there's, oh, they just are so needy, they need appreciation, or, oh, if I say thank you, then they're not going to keep trying. There's no science to support any of those statements. The science is that if you express gratitude with the people who work for you, then they will want to do more work for you because they know that you value them. Yes. And there is no time where you should at any time withhold appreciation for any reason. Right. And with that, I also think, a little bit of patience, right? So if you're an overachiever and you have people that are working for you that are not, you have to remember that they're people, right? And I happen to be a very fast thinker, right? So I'm already at the resolution. I had one of my team yesterday, we were trying to figure out some stuff. She said, "You did that really fast. I'm still back on the calculation." And I said, it's just what I do. But you have to remember that every single person that works for you is not you. Right. And I think we do that. We look through our own personal lens at, well, they're just, whatever shortfall we think they have. And the last thing is really taking time to focus on your team's strengths and finding out how those strengths can complement each other. And I know you have a lot of experience with, if I remember correctly, with strength finders. Yes. And I did that with my team. I bought the books, I brought it in, they did it. And it was so funny. And I again, on about time, I want to keep this moving, but you had, or when I did it, I laid out a table of the whole team and everyone on the team had harmony except for me. And everybody's like, oh, and it was during kind of a challenging time, right? And she doesn't have harmony. And the one guy on my team that was in the military said, if she had harmony, we would never get anywhere.
Very astute observation.
Right, because you're not going to go forward if, and that doesn't mean that I'm mean to people. It just means that that is not one of my top 5 strengths, right?
Right, right.
So there are other things like strategy that are,
Right.
and
Yes.
influencer and other things that you don't want to have. But I want to save time for you to ask me about my book.
And that is the next question. No, I appreciate the plug for strengths, which fun fact, they actually changed the name to Gallup Strengths instead of Strengths Finder now. I don't know. So I try to keep up on that. But yeah, I love utilizing strengths for that reason, because it allows you as a team to, again, like you were saying, readjust how you look at somebody. So something that you might see as a weakness because it's not a strength of yours is actually a strength in somebody else. And I love the harmony example because I don't have harmony in my top 5. And I've been on teams with people with harmony, and it's hard for me sometimes to, because I'm like, let's go. We know what's happening. Like, let's just go. And I'm completely okay with conflict. I like having discussions with people. I like getting into it, not in a disrespectful way, but actually in a very respectful way. Like, let's disagree so that we can figure everything out and get to the bottom of it. And if you have somebody that has harmony and you're trying to do that, it's not going to go really great. So I appreciate that.
There's a misunderstanding that you have to agree with everybody you work with, and newsflash, you don't.
Right.
You can be very productive and not agree on every single thing that comes out.
Yes.
Yeah.
The most important thing to me is that you have a voice, and that voice is heard, and that opinion and whatever it is heard and it is validated, whether or not that's the way the team goes or the decision. At the end of the day, it sometimes can matter, but it doesn't really matter. I think giving everybody that voice and being able to appreciate the view that they bring to the table, that to me is the biggest win when you are managing a team of people. So yes. Okay. Let's talk about the book. Okay. Tell me about a book that has changed your perspective in your career or life.
Okay, so it's going to be an unlikely choice because whenever I use it in trainings, people are like, I never thought of it for that. But there is a book called The 4 Agreements that is by Don Miguel Ruiz. And I read it, I don't know, 15 years ago, maybe 20 years. No, probably 15 years ago. And when it came out. So I guess it came out in mid 2000s. So whenever it came out, 10 years ago, what have you. So as I'm going through my master's program, I'm seeing everything that is covered in this book comes up, right? So there's 4 agreements. One is that you're impeccable with your word, and that is not saying bad things about others or yourself, right? So not beating up on yourself. Number 2 is to not make assumptions, right? Have the courage to ask the questions, which goes to what you were talking about when you're coaching people. Did that really happen, or are you assuming that's what that person's thinking? And for those of us that don't always work in the same building as the people we work with, it can be very challenging because your mind starts running around making assumptions. Number 3, don't take things personally, right? So, and I use it in a training for our front desk staff on revenue cycle management. I just kind of do this one piece on the 4 agreements and say, don't take it personally if a patient comes in and is angry with you. You don't know what's going on in their world. By that same token, don't assume or take personally that your supervisor is short with you today because you don't know why, right? So, and have the courage to ask the question. So don't take things personally. And then the 4th one is to always do your best. And I am of the mind that most employees get up, at least the employees that I know, get up in the morning and have every intention of coming into work and doing their best. I don't think they get up and say, you know what, I'm going to go to work and I'm just going to screw around. I'm really not going to do my job. I think they have that intention, but then family happens, traffic happens, pandemics happen, and Zoom won't connect, whatever. And their best today may not be the best that they did yesterday, and it couldn't be the best of the next day. But as long as at the end of the day, you can know that you did your best with what you had, the time, where you were with what you had, great. If you can look at the end of the day and say, oh, yeah, I probably could have done better, then that is a lesson for you.
Right.
So as I have continued to read business books, this comes up over and over again. I mean, assumptions and are all about, Carolyn Dweck's mindset, and Marilee Adams, change your questions, change your life. All of those things come from these stories that we're telling ourselves. So he says it, it's a very simple little 100-page book, but I can't recommend it enough. So.
Yes, thank you. And you recommended that book in one of our conversations a while back, and I actually ordered it. It is on my nightstand. So it is on my list of books to read. So I'm really excited to read it, especially now that I have a little more of a synopsis about it. I mean, I trust you, so I was going to read it anyway. But okay. My last question is around controlling your career. So this is something that I'm really passionate about. My coaching program is around controlling your career. I want to help people take control of their career. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to provide examples of what controlling your career can look like, because it can look different for everyone. So can you tell me about a time in your life, in your career, that you felt you took control of your career?
Interesting. There are several. Making decisions about not wanting to stay in positions that were not, speaking to my core values, and for whatever reason, going back to my master's program to develop me. So, but and from that, I think comes back to what I said earlier, which I think this is what helps me control my career, is I have a role in what's going on, right? So if I'm not happy or if I'm not fulfilled, why is that? And there comes points where I think you have to make hard decisions about your future, right? I had an opportunity come up at the beginning of the pandemic, and it would have been just such a great opportunity, and it was really more focused on people and less focused on numbers, but I didn't take it, right? Not just because it was a pandemic. So it wasn't about job security. It was, I have a commitment that I have, and I want to see this piece through. So I think it's very easy for people to just, I'm not happy in my job, I'm not fulfilled. Okay, then ask yourselves the questions, why not? And it's what you were saying about coaching. And I think, not that I don't think coaching is great, but I think we all have a responsibility, right? Um, One of my professors for human capital gave me a great piece on getting feedback from people. Create your feedback circle, right? Your feedback doesn't just come from your leader, right? That's your review, right? Your boss is going to tell you, you'll get your annual review or however those things are done. But I do feedback with my team. I do feedback with peers, and with people that I don't even work with, to get input. Because I think sometimes if we're just in our work self, right, it's like interacting with you here. It's like, oh yeah, I guess I do know some stuff. Right?
Yes, you do.
But so I don't have one thing to tell you, but I do think that people, just like in life, right, we need to take responsibility for what it is that we do or don't have in our life that we, either want to get rid of or we want to add. And I'm incredibly fulfilled at work. I love working with the people that I work with, and but somebody didn't do that for me.
Right.
I created the environment. Sometimes you have subcultures within a bigger culture. Don't think, I think people are waiting for leaders to make changes in organizations. And and I say this when I'm presenting on the topic of positive or what have you make that decision, right?
Right.
You create your own little grassroots movement and change the way your little ecosystem within the big ecosystem behaves, and not wait for someone over here to tell you it's okay to do things that you think would make your work life better. Does that all make sense?
Yes, yes, that absolutely makes sense. One of the things that I think has been made evident throughout this interview is that you have really taken control of your career at various points, and you've realized and you've been very attuned with who you are, which is part of why I wanted to bring you on as well. I so appreciate the wisdom that you have brought into this interview, and I know that the listeners are going to get so much out of it, and I so appreciate it. One thing I wanted to touch on that you were just talking about, coaching is great. And I think some people need coaching. Some people don't. Some people can really do a lot of this on their own. And so I'm going to make another shameless plug for myself, but uh, season 1 of the podcast, and one of the reasons that I actually started the podcast in the first place, I called it, Should You Quit Your Job? And what I do is it's 10 episodes, and I take people through different things that you might be thinking about when it comes to quitting your job. And I ask questions, and I give you exercises and all different types of resources to help you figure that out for yourself. And so I'm saying that because there are so many resources out there. I mean, we've mentioned a ton of different books and authors and things like that. And I'm going to link everything that we talked about into the blog post. But there is so much information out there for you to start figuring it out, answering questions for yourself, and digging in. If you really feel like you need to bounce, ideas off someone, or you want to go deeper, you want to dig deeper, then yes, go get a coach, invest in that. But honestly, one of my tenets throughout the work that I do and this company is this information needs to be out there either for free or extremely reasonable. And so go back and look at the episodes that I did over the last year in 2020, because I can tell you, I have pretty much asked every question that I've probably ever asked in a coaching session in my 10 years of experience, right? It's all there. You just have to listen to it and apply it wherever your situation is at. And so anyway, I just had to put that plug in there because I don't want people to think, oh, I need to go get an MBA, or I need to invest thousands into a coach, or this or that. No, you don't. You absolutely do not need to do that, but you need to have the wherewithal to go, I think something's amiss here. Let's dig into what that could look like, and where can I find the resources for it?
Yep, I would completely agree. And I appreciate that you put those podcasts together before. And there's people have to, or should be aware that there's a lot of information out there, right? And not all of it's good. I have read some books where I'm like, did they just, what did they just say in here? It seems like they just quoted a bunch of other people, right?
Yes.
And yeah, so I think digging in and doing your research, but yes, the more resources that people can have that they don't have to pay an arm and a leg for, because not everybody has that ability. There was a period in my career where I would never have had money to invest in that, and it certainly wasn't something my company was doing. But you find your own way. But yes, you're right. Not everybody can go to an MBA. Not everybody gets a professional coach. But that should not ever make someone say, "Oh, I guess there's nothing I can do, and I'm just stuck here because I don't have those opportunities."
Absolutely. Absolutely. Cheryl, thank you so much. Thank you for being on the podcast. Where can people find you, connect with you?
I am most active on LinkedIn.
Okay.
So, and I may turn away salespeople, but I don't turn away real people. But that is where I'm the most active. I do post daily with quotes that I've found, not just reposting other people's stuff, but and I love to connect with people. I have lots of resources. I love that. It's part of my new people thing.
Yes, and I will put your LinkedIn link into the blog post so that people can find you. And Cheryl and I are connected, so I can attest she is posting a lot of really great content that is gonna make you think. And that's what you want. You want to start looking at your situation in a different way, regardless of what that situation is. So again, Cheryl, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.